The morning the pilot refused to fly began with the silence that felt heavier than turbulence, a silence that pressed against the windows of the private jet and into the chest of everyone nearby. The aircraft stood gleaming on the tarmac like a promise, but inside the cockpit, tension curled like smoke. A single father, exhausted and steady-eyed, adjusted his uniform with hands that had known both lullabies and loss, while a senior pilot stared at him with thinly veiled contempt. What started as a routine flight would soon unravel into a revelation so powerful it would drain the color from one man's face and permanently alter how everyone on board understood dignity, humility, and the unseen weight people carry. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who keep going even when life bends them low, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. The co-pilot's name was Daniel Reyes, and his life had not followed a straight flight path. Once, years earlier, the sky had been simple for him. He had trained hard, earned his wings with pride, and imagined a future where his career and family would rise together. But life does not always respect careful planning. When his wife died suddenly after a brief illness, the sky seemed to collapse. Daniel became a single father overnight to a 5-year-old daughter who still waited by the door some evenings, asking why mommy had not come home yet. Grief was not a storm that passed quickly, it was a constant headwind. Still, Daniel flew. He flew because his daughter needed stability, because routine was the only thing that kept their small world from breaking apart, and because the cockpit was one of the few places where the noise in his head quieted. That morning, Daniel arrived early, as he always did, carrying the quiet discipline of someone who could not afford mistakes. He had already packed his daughter's lunch before dawn, braided her hair with careful fingers, and kissed her forehead as she slept. He left a note on the kitchen table with a small drawing of her plane and a heart. Then he drove to the private airfield, where wealth and power often disguise themselves as entitlement. The flight was a charter for a group of executives traveling to a high-profile conference. The aircraft itself was new, luxurious, and impressive, the kind that made people straighten their backs when they saw it. The senior pilot assigned to the flight was known for his reputation as much as his skill. He was experienced, confident, and used to being obeyed. He had built his career on precision, but also on an unspoken belief that rank defined worth. When he learned he would be flying with a co-pilot he did not recognize well, his irritation simmered. As he entered the cockpit and saw Daniel, something hardened in his expression. Perhaps it was Daniel's slightly worn uniform, or the faint shadows under his eyes, or the quiet way he moved without demanding attention. Whatever the reason, the senior pilot's mind leapt to conclusions, and those conclusions turned into judgment. Without raising his voice, the pilot made it clear he was uncomfortable. He questioned Daniel's qualifications, his experience, his readiness. He suggested delays, reassignments, anything that would remove this unknown co-pilot from the cockpit. The refusal to fly did not come as a shout but as a cold declaration, spoken with the authority of someone who believed his opinion was final. Around them, the ground crew shifted uneasily. Daniel listened, his face calm, his posture respectful. Inside, however, something old and familiar tightened. It was the feeling of being underestimated, of being seen as less than, a feeling he had known since becoming a single father in a world that often equated exhaustion with weakness. Daniel had faced worse than this. He had faced hospital corridors at night, funeral arrangements he did not understand, and a child's grief he could not fix. Compared to that, a man's refusal felt small, but it still stung. He explained his credentials, his hours, his spotless safety record, and his dedication to the job. He did not mention the nights he studied flight manuals after putting his daughter to bed, or the mornings he ran on coffee and resolve. He did not argue loudly or demand respect. He simply stood there, steady as a runway light in fog, waiting for reason to land. The delay began to attract attention. Passengers waited, schedules tightened. The aircraft remained grounded, a symbol of stalled pride. Finally, the situation escalated to management, and that was when the story took a turn no one expected. The aircraft was not owned by the charter company in the way most assumed. It belonged to a private owner who leased it for select flights. That owner, as it happened, was listed in the documents Daniel carried quietly in his bag. Documents he rarely thought about anymore. Years before, long before grief reshaped his life, Daniel had made a decision that few knew about, using an inheritance he had never spoken of and savings from years of disciplined work. He had invested in aviation not just as a pilot but as an owner. He believed deeply in the industry and in creating opportunities that were fair and safe. He had purchased the aircraft as part of a long-term plan to ensure stability for his family and to contribute to something he loved. Ownership had never been a badge for him, it was simply another responsibility, another promise to keep. As the tension reached its peak, management requested confirmation from the aircraft's owner regarding the crew. The request traveled through channels quickly, and the response arrived just as swiftly. The owner approved the flight with the current crew, noting full confidence in both pilots. When the senior pilot read the name on the document, his breath caught. It was Daniel Reyes, the man he had dismissed. The co-pilot he had refused to fly with, was the owner of the very aircraft beneath their feet. The color drained from the pilot's face, replaced by a stark awareness of his mistake. The realization was not just professional, it was deeply personal. In that instant, the hierarchy he relied on collapsed. Wealth, authority, and control shifted silently across the cockpit. Daniel did not smile or gloat. He did not raise his voice or savor the moment. He simply met the pilot's eyes with a look that held neither anger nor triumph, only a quiet clarity. The flight eventually took off, smooth and uneventful, the way Daniel always preferred things to be. In the air, professionalism returned, but the atmosphere had changed. The senior pilot, once rigid with certainty, now moved with cautious respect. He followed procedures meticulously, aware that every action was being mirrored by a man who had proven, without theatrics, that character outweighed assumptions. The passengers, unaware of the drama below deck, enjoyed their comfortable journey, never realizing they were traveling inside a lesson in humility. For Daniel, the flight was not about proving a point. It was about completing a job, returning safely, and getting home in time to read his daughter a bedtime story. Yet the moment lingered with him. It reminded him of how often people misjudge others based on fragments, on appearances that tell only the smallest part of a story. He thought of his daughter, growing up in a world that would test her worth, and hoped she would learn to see beyond surfaces, to value kindness over power. When the plane landed, the senior pilot approached Daniel with the humility that had been absent before. The words were brief, but the change was evident. Respect, once withheld, now offered freely. Daniel accepted it with the same grace he carried throughout the day. He gathered his belongings, thanked the crew, and walked off the aircraft into the open air, where the sky stretched wide and forgiving. Life did not suddenly become easier after that day. Daniel still woke early, still worried about homework and scrapped knees, still felt the ache of absence when his daughter asked questions he could not answer. But something subtle shifted within him. He was reminded that strength did not always announce itself loudly, and that sometimes the most powerful revelations happened without applause. He continued flying, continued parenting, continued owning a responsibility he never flaunted, guided by the same steady compass he always trusted. As weeks passed, the story circulated quietly among crews and staff, stripped of names but heavy with meaning. It became a reminder whispered in break rooms and briefing halls, a caution against arrogance and a tribute to resilience. Some people learned from it, others merely nodded and moved on. Daniel did not concern himself with who understood. His focus remained on the small, sacred moments that truly mattered. One evening, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she asked him about the planes he flew. He told her they were strong and beautiful and that they carried people safely where they needed to go. He did not tell her about refusal or humiliation or pale faces. He told her about responsibility, about doing the right thing even when no one is watching, and about believing in yourself quietly. She fell asleep smiling, and Daniel watched her for a long moment, feeling the weight and wonder of the life he was building. If this story is touching something inside you right now, please take a moment to comment below and share how it made you feel. Your words mean more than you know, and they help keep stories like this alive. Near the end of his day, Daniel stood outside, looking up at the night sky, where planes traced invisible paths across the darkness. He thought about how many lives intersected without ever truly seeing one another. He thought about how easy it was to judge and how hard it was to understand, and he felt grateful, not for the moment of revelation, but for the quiet endurance that carried him through every day. If this story moved your heart, inspired you, or reminded you to look twice at the people around you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach more hearts and reminds the world that kindness still matters. Before the video ends, we have one special request for you. Please comment the word respect if you believe everyone deserves dignity, no matter their title or circumstances. Sometimes, a single word can carry a powerful message. The aircraft Daniel owned continued to fly many journeys, but the most important one was always the drive home, where a small pair of arms waited to wrap around him, and where no one cared about rank, wealth, or authority. In that place, he was simply a father, steady and present, and that was the role he cherished most of all.